We shall now focus on the relationship between the data revolution and governance. But first we have to define what governance means. Governance is the way society organizes to define and achieve their common future. As a society, we want to move, we have choices as to where we're going to go, what we're going to do. And governance is the way we decide on that. Do we include everybody in the decision on what our future should be? Do we leave that decision to a few individuals or to just one individual? So how we define the future is governance. Governance includes both a demand side, which is how society expresses what they think our future should be, and a supply side, how the capacity of government to respond to the expressions of society as to the future that they want. Now, governance occurs in three different levels: at the local, at the national, and at the global. So for instance, the Sustainable Development Goals is an instance of global governance, wherein collectively the communities of nations decided that these are the goals that they hope to pursue by 2030. Now, data has an important role in governance. Data can improve governance. And so now we talk of data-driven governance, which is the intensive and extensive use of data in how societies organize to define and achieve their common future. So for instance, do local governments use data to decide on projects? Do national governments use data to make decisions? And global governance, for instance, the United Nations and other global institutions use data to monitor and evaluate projects. We also talk of data-driven government. And we define this as one where actionable information is available when and where needed for all critical public decisions. Surprisingly, this is not yet the case for most governments. They do not have the information that they need when they're about to make a decision. It's not that the data is not there, it's just that it is not available to them. In the Philippines, we have a nice concept for this. We called it guesstimate. No, it's a contraction of the words guess and estimate. So people make decisions, or rather government officials make decisions on the basis of an estimate which is almost equivalent to a guess. So a guesstimate. So we want to move from such a situation to one where actionable information is available when and where for all critical public decisions. Now, there are distinct benefits as a consequence of data-driven government: sounder governance and control, optimized fraud and error detection, mitigation, and prevention, improved efficiency through intelligent networks, improved services based on the insights gained from those being served. Now, when we look into two kinds of data-driven governance, the first is data-driven decision-making, and the second is evidence-based policy-making. Data-driven decision-making is the process which involves collecting data, extracting patterns and facts from that data, and utilizing those facts to make inferences that influence decision-making. Now, you would say, but isn't all decision-making data-driven? Yes, that's true. But the level of use of data is very different. Studies have shown there are at least 5 levels of use of data in decision making. The first is called nascent. In this instance, we have a lot of data, but it's not used well. Data does not provide insight, and data is not the key part of decision making. The second level is basic. Data is used in reports, but usually in a cursory way, with little reference to decisions would have to be made. Level 3 is called intermediate. Data analysis is usually requested for decision making, but can be inadequate because analysis is not of high quality, they're not targeted at the decision to be made, or the right data is not available. The fourth level is advanced. Some decisions are informed by data on both the front line and at senior levels, but is not consistent across the organization. The fifth or the highest level is called data vor. In this instance, rich in data intelligence and insight, data is analyzed specifically for the purpose of key decisions which have to be made consistently across the organization. Data is available in a timely fashion. I would suggest that there are very few countries at the data vor level. As a matter of fact, I would argue that probably the majority would be at the intermediate and advanced level, with some countries in the developing world still in the nascent and basic levels. So the idea, of course, is to move us from nascent to basic to advanced and eventually data vor. The other way that we could use data in governance is called evidence-based policymaking. And this is where we use the best available research and information to guide decisions at all stages of the policy process and in all branches of government. The first is build and compile rigorous evidence about what works, including the cost and benefit. The second principle is monitor program delivery and use impact evaluation to measure program effectiveness. The third is use rigorous evidence to improve programs, scale what works, and redirect funds away from consistently ineffective programs. The fourth is encourage innovation and test new approaches. So notice that we use the word rigorous in the principles. Because it's not that, again, people are saying, but we all use evidence all the time. Right? But the problem sometimes is you cherry pick evidence. You make a decision already and then you find support for your decision. And not look at evidence that suggests that the decision is wrong. So evidence-based policy is that you really look at the evidence before you make decision. You use evidence to guide what policies you're going to use, what policies you're going to adopt, what policies are you going to implement, and then you use evidence as well in terms of the implementation and the monitoring of said policies. Now let's take a look at specific case of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we know that the SDGs aim at ending poverty, protecting the planet, and ensuring prosperity. And that the SDG has 17 goals with 169 targets to be achieved by 2030. The Sustainable Development Goals underscores the importance of monitoring development results and the importance of data and statistics for sustainable development. So for instance, SDG target number 17 says, increase significantly the availability of high quality, timely, and reliable data disaggregated by income, gender, age, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, geographic location, and other characteristics relevant in national context. The same SDG 17 calls for new measures of sustainable development progress beyond GDP. But if you look at the 17 goals and the 169 targets of the SDG, it's quite daunting that we'll be able to achieve it in such a short period of time. As a matter of fact, the UNDP said, the SDG increases by orders of magnitude the scale and scope of data required to implement and monitor sustainable development. That even countries with the best statistical capacities will find this a challenge. So, let's go back to the indicators. Right? 169 indicators for the 17 targets. We've already made studies about the data required and the methodology that is needed to be able to monitor fairly well the SDGs. And this study showed that there are three categories already that we have to look at. The first category, or Tier 1, there is an existing methodology and that data is widely available. Okay. Tier 2, there is a methodology, but data is not readily available. And Tier 3, there is no internationally agreed methodology, and that it still has to be developed. Now, looking at the 169, from the lens of these three tiers, we find that in 2/3 of the indicators, we have no available data that we can use for monitoring them. Close to a quarter have a methodology, but no data. And 38% do not have an agreed upon methodology and data. So you can see that between our aspirations and our ability to monitor them is still a huge gap. We still have 38% where there is no methodology and no data, and close to a quarter that has a methodology to measure but no data. In Asia, we face real data challenges as regards to the SDG. And studies have shown that there's need to strengthen national statistical systems to report on the SDGs and encourage innovation in data collection to simplify the tasks at hand. There's also the challenge to overcome monitoring that is driven by the availability of data rather than its relevance for national priorities. Again, a mismatch. There is data, but not to monitor the SDGs. So moving away from the SDGs and looking at it from a wider perspective, we know that we still have a lot of challenges in terms of data-driven governance. A 2017 survey of public officials in 126 low and middle income countries show that leaders use data or analysis more to conduct retrospective assessments of past performance than inform future policy and programs. So data is being used, but it is to evaluate the past. It is not used to help decide about future policies. Why is that? Part of it is that there are technical challenges that we face. These include lack of data standards, poor data quality, we cannot share data as a consequence of poor data governance. But there's also what we call bureaucratic politics that gets into the way. In a world where information is power, there are still officials who are unwilling to modernize data collection and production and or are afraid of releasing data for fear of losing power.